If you're visiting today, be sure and come back next Sunday. The A team will be here next Sunday. All weekend, Courtney started talking about this, I guess, Friday, and she kept referring to me as Plan B, Plan B, Plan B. So I'm Plan B today, and Courtney's my daughter. What's interesting, the fathers and daughters thing, Hi, Courtney. I assume she's watching. Her instructions to me, it wasn't, oh, good luck, Dad, or you'll do great, or it was, now, Dad, they'll be live streaming, so don't say anything inappropriate. So she set the bar pretty low, right? Don't say anything inappropriate. I'll try to do that. I guess it's kind of terrifying to turn the mic over to somebody who has a lifetime of embarrassing stories, right? And she's not even here. This is awesome. She's not even here. Next time, see, I didn't have time. Next time I'm bringing, every illustration will be a picture and a story about Courtney, I promise. Not today. Okay, so here are some of the last words that Jesus said to his disciples. John 15:1. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. My Father is the gardener. Now, we don't read it that way. We don't hear that. What we hear is, my Father is the genie, right? We hear a God who will give us everything we need when we need it, immediately, as quickly as possible. And I think about Jesus. He's surveying the crowd, and he's thinking of all the analogies he could use to explain this process of change, which it is a process, by the way, and he comes up with gardener. If you want to get something from God this year, then we need to change this idea of quick, change this idea that God is some kind of a Santa Claus to give us whatever we need right away. Stop thinking like that and embrace the process. How many know that our walk with God, that changing, that accomplishing anything is in fact a process? There's work that goes into that. Obedience and staying and perseverance. We want that instant gratification, right? How many of you started a diet at the beginning of the year? You don't want to raise your hand, right? I have been on a diet. I've been on a diet all my life. I've lost the same 5 pounds probably 100 times. I lost 500 pounds. You should have saw me 500 pounds ago. It's the same way, though. We want instant results. We want to lose weight, but we're eating burritos the size of our head. We want to pay off our debt and save for retirement, but we don't discipline our spending. We don't give to God. We want to get healthy, but we don't go to the gym. We don't want to put the work into the process that brings about the result that we're trying to accomplish. And all gain and no pain. I like that. I mean, who likes pain? But today I want to talk about sameness. And today I want to talk about this. Here's my first point. If you resist the monotonous, you'll miss the miraculous. If you resist the monotonous, you'll miss the miraculous. Put that first clip up there, if you would. Odell Beckham. Probably, some people think the greatest catch ever made. I mean, it is incredible. Look at that. He's fouled on the play. He stays in bounds. A lot of people said, well, that was just a lucky catch. I mean, you really see it there. And that's what people say a lot of times. When somebody has success, when somebody has it going on in their walk with God or financially, we say, man, they're just lucky, right? Somebody gave that to them. They were in the right place at the right time. We always kind of play it off like that, but they had some cameras on the field before the game. Roll that second clip. See, this is before the game. What do you see? The same thing. The same thing. See, he just made that catch look lucky, but the fact is, he practiced that. Let me tell you something. You get what you practice. You ever caught yourself saying, well, that's not me. somebody cuts you off in traffic and you wave at them in that special way and you're like, oh, I can't believe I did that. And then you look, oh, well, that's somebody I go to church with, you know. You ever know that? In a small town, you got to be careful. When I go to Kansas City, I drive completely different than when I do around Chillicothe. And I suspect you do the same here in Maryville. Because you're like, man, I can't do that here because I probably go to church with them. I know them somehow. But you do something you're not proud of, and you're like, oh, that wasn't me. Well, it was you. It was. You got to face the fact that we are what we do. You get what you practice. If you repeat it over and over again, you're going to just keep repeating it, right? And so this is the point I want to make to you at the beginning is if you resist the monotonous, the routine, the repetition, you'll miss the miracle. You know, this is an important sermon for some of you. I'm not throwing any shade on Courtney. She was going to be speaking today, and I'm sure it would have been a lot better than what I'm giving you today. Well, certainly it would have looked a lot better. You know, I'm her dad, right? And you're like, man, thank goodness that she took after her mom. This is my wife right here, Kim. Wave at the crowd. I know, I get that. Well, I used to be in business, and I'd go on business trips. And so we would go, Kim would come a lot of times, and when I'd introduce her to the group, I'd always get the same result. I'd always get this response. Your wife's pretty. I'd always be like, well, what did you expect? I mean, what do you think I was going to drag in here, you know? So thank goodness Courtney took after her mom. But in any event, this is an important sermon because we need to realize, we need to make up our mind to give up on the instant, to embrace the process, to put in the time, to put in the work, to see the results. It doesn't come easy. Whether it's in our marriage, in our walk with God, with our money, with whatever it is. Easy ain't God. Say that with me. I know it's not grammatically correct. Say it with me. Easy ain't God. If the only thing you take out of here this morning is that, say it again. Easy ain't God. You will have gained something. Because that kind of success doesn't just happen. It takes work. It takes effort. God is not a genie. He's a gardener. What a model. What a picture of what goes on in our life. I think about pruning. I think about planting. I think about having to water that and then having to harvest that. The monotonous, it grows in the dirt. The day-to-day things. The things that aren't so pleasant sometimes are the things that God uses to groom us and grow us. And so if you resist that, if you resist the monotonous, you'll miss the miraculous. Some habits don't break overnight. I mean, you know, I'm not going to lose the weight overnight. It took me 40, well, let's see, I'm 60. So I started getting fat about the time I got married. I don't know why that was told. My wife is an excellent cook, by the way. So it took me 40 years to develop this physique. And I'm proud of it. Takes a lot of food to fill that up. So it ain't going to go away overnight. Some habits don't go away overnight. It takes a process, and you have to keep going. You have to keep sowing and planting. So here's the second thing I want to say to you about this. Repeat the right things until the routine becomes the reward. Repeat the right things until the routine becomes the reward. You know, I have been golfing for 40 years. And I am a horrible golfer. I mean, it is just terrible. I'm really terrible. And I am proof that you can do something for 40 years and not get any better at it. And so a few years ago, I hired me a coach. I hired a coach. It was not money well invested. As a matter of fact, he fired me. He didn't even finish the lesson. He said, you are so bad, there's nothing I can do for you. Just try it on your own. He fires me. But one thing that I took out of that embarrassing and humbling experience, I couldn't even pay this man to coach me. He said this, and it makes a lot of sense to me. He says, if you're hitting the ball wrong, then stop hitting the ball. I was up there one day, and he's coaching me, and I'm just, you know, I'm thrashing, and I'm hacking it around and knocking it here, and I'm just beating myself to death. And he's like, just stop. Go home and we'll try again next week. Listen, practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. If you keep doing it again and again and again, it's going to become permanent in your life. You get what you practice. So, so many times we mess up, we're disappointed, we pray and we cry and we feel sorry and we say, I'm going to try harder. Well, if you try harder doing the wrong thing, guess what you do? More wrong thing. It doesn't work that way. Repeat the right things. Repeat the right things until the routine becomes its own reward. The key to change is practice, but it's practicing the right things. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. That was just the introduction, but we're in good shape. That's what I want to talk to you about today, is what is the right thing? What is the things that we want to do in our life? So it's not flashy, it's not new, it's back to the basics of Christianity. So let me just talk about the basics this morning. The golden rule. How many have heard of the golden rule? Really? The rest of you, you're just not going to wait. You're just not going to respond, right? Yeah, I'm not raising my hand for that old man. No, listen. The golden rule, right? How many can say the golden rule? Say it. All I heard was, all right, I'm going to call someone down and you stand up and read something. No, the golden rule, right? That's the basic cornerstone of Christianity. Jesus said it this way, so in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Usually we just say it, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now this 11-word phrase is so powerful. 2,000 years ago, Jesus says this, and it is life-altering. A few years ago, and then I said that earlier, and then I realized that this has actually been 20 years ago. So some of you were not even alive when this movie came out. But does anybody remember the movie Pay It Forward? Raise your hand. All the old people raised their hand. Thank you for your support, right? This movie, had a premise. I mean, it had some questionable, Hollywood deal, but it had a premise that was really this principle. The idea was the kid had a social studies experiment, and he had to come up with a way that would change the world. And so his idea was that you would do for someone something that they couldn't do for themselves, and then that person wouldn't pay you back, they would pay it forward. Okay, well, that's the idea behind what Jesus is saying here. He says that, you say, 2,000 years ago, Jesus comes up with this, and then I show up, and it seems kind of random that I'm going to pull out the golden rule to talk to you about. But really, what I'm talking about, I thought I had big ears, but they don't look on there. Really, what I'm talking about is how to impact the primary relationships in your life. That's really what this is about, is how do I deal with the primary relationships in my life? See, usually we have 3 primary relationships in our life. It may be you and your spouse. It may be you and your kids. It may be you and a parent. How do I make those better? Well, this right here is what I'm focusing on. So let me give you 3 points about the golden rule this morning. 3 points about this seldom practiced, easy to understand, right? But hard to do principle. Point number 1. View the rule positively. View the rule positively. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Every major religion has some version of this rule. But in every major religion besides this, it's stated negatively. It's stated something like, don't do anything to anyone that would harm them. Do no harm. Don't do anything to someone that you wouldn't want them to do to you. But Jesus takes this very familiar principle to his hearers of the day, and he spins it around. He turns it around, and he states it in the positive sense. There's a story that was going around about 20 BC. So it was about 50 years before Jesus preached this sermon. And the story was that a Gentile came to Rabbi Hillel, who was a famous rabbi, and he came to him, and he came to his rival teacher, and he said to them both, he said, I will convert to Judaism if either one of you can teach me the law while standing on one foot. And so Rabbi Hillel comes up with this. He says, do not do to your fellow what you hate to have done to you. This is the whole law. The rest is explanation. And so this story was commonly heard. It was part of the culture. And everybody would have heard it. Most of the good Jewish men would have repeated this story. And so Jesus comes and he takes that very familiar concept and he completely turns it upside down. He doesn't say it like they did. He says it differently, and he says, do to others. Not do not do to others. And it's radical. It wouldn't have been lost on that crowd. They would have understood what he did there. They would have seen that this was something different. Let me illustrate it this way. Let's suppose you go to a funeral and this man, you're at his funeral and he's been comatose all his life. Well, you could say about this man, what a great man he was. He never hurt anybody. He never lied. He never stole anything. But then someone else might say, well, that's true, but he also never did a kindness to anyone. He never paid anyone a compliment. He never said thank you. See, this issue is action versus inaction. Do not do to someone what you hate to have done. That doesn't even require a pulse. The issue is action versus inaction. That kind of rule lacks the fortitude to change anybody. But stated positively, when you spin it around, do unto others, do something for someone else, man, that's countercultural, isn't it? Our culture says, do unto others as they have done to you, right? Don't you disrespect me. I can't get my head going like they do, don't you, whatever. Somebody's always wanting to tell somebody off, I'm going to fix you. And our culture says, get even. Do it to them. And if you're smart, do it before they do it to you, right? But Jesus says, no, that's not what I'm saying here. Let me ask you this. At the end of your life, in them final moments of time, what do you think you will regret more? The things that you did or the things that you didn't do? As a pastor, I've stood at many bedsides with people passing. I've had some of those conversations. I've never heard one person say at the end of life, at the end, right there, to say, man, I wish I'd have worked more. I wish I'd have bought more stuff. No, that's not what you hear. It always comes back to this. What we regret always flows out of the things that we value the most. That's pretty good. Did you hear that, Courtney? What we regret always flows out of what we value the most. The issue, though, is that the things that we value the most, they never come with a sense of urgency. Think about that a minute. It's one crisis to another crisis. It's one urgent thing to another urgent thing. And if I was to ask you what's most important to you, you would say your family, you would say your children, you would say your spouse, you would say your walk with God. But there's always more time for that later, isn't there? Well, I'm going to take that trip. I'm going to spend that time with my family, but I've got to get this done first. They'll understand. And life passes by moment by moment by moment by moment. And we can end up skimming our life, scanning our life. You college kids got a test coming and you haven't read the book, what do? You skim it, right? You scan it. And we can do that in our life. We can just scan through life, skim through life. We don't get deep into anything. We're shallow in everything. We just push right on through. And that's what we're talking about here. It's the acts of love that will last eternity. The only thing that will follow you into eternity is the person sitting next to you right now. On your left and on your right. That's what's going into the eternity with us. Those acts of kindness that we do to one another. The impact that we have on the people around us. That's what we will send into eternity. So a life of no regrets is a life that is done. It's a life of action, of deeds, of words spoken, the doing unto others. To tell, or better yet show, my spouse how much I love them. To be there for my children, for my grandchildren. To be a friend, to do something, to convey God's love to the community with acts of kindness. To do unto others. That's what will last. If your rule is don't do to others what you hate, then we neglect doing for them what we love. Jesus says, look beyond the negative. Look beyond yourself. Point number 2. Understand the rule comprehensively. Understand the rule comprehensively. Jesus said that this rule, this statement, that it sums up all the law and the prophets. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, what's he talk about next? He says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law in verse 17, or the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So when he says he wants to fulfill the law, he goes, let's see what he talks about. In verse 21, he says, the law says, don't murder. Again, stated negatively. Jesus changes that. He says, but I say to you, not just don't kill them. Now that's a good thing. If you've got a problem with someone, don't kill them. But Jesus says, no, what I'm saying to you is do forgive. Do love them. Verse 27. Don't commit adultery. Again, stated negatively, but Jesus says, I'm not doing away with that. But the fulfillment of that is that we love one another as brothers and sisters with respect. Verse 31. Don't divorce without a certificate. Jesus says, now what I'm saying to you is do be faithful to your spouse. Verse 33. The law says don't break your oath. Jesus says, no, what I say to you is be a person who doesn't even need an oath. You don't have to swear. Just do what you say you're going to do and mean it. Verse 38, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Jesus is saying, no, the fulfillment of that is that you forgive, that you don't get even, that you let it go. He says it sums up all of the law. All of it is reinterpreted. All of it is fulfilled. All of it is completed in this one 11-word phrase. The doing. The doing. Impact every dimension of our life. Impact every relationship in our life. Can you imagine what this would do in a marriage? Ephesians 5, verse 25 through 33. Oh, for fun, let me just jump up to verse 1. It says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands in the Lord. I'm just playing. I'd be afraid to preach that to you guys. No, but drop down 25 verses. I'll leave that to Chad to talk about verse 1. Verse 25 says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. All the wives say amen, right? Each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself. And the wife must respect her husband. Now, when you read that, that's the model for the marriage. When you read that, does the husband get the same command as the wife? The husband is commanded to love his wife. The wife is commanded to respect her husband. Does that mean the husbands don't have to respect the wife, or the wife doesn't have to love? No, you don't love without respecting. You don't respect without loving. But what you see in this verse of Scripture is the different ways that our needs are met. You know, to a man, the most important thing in his life is that the woman that he cares the most about respects him. When there's a lack of respect for a husband by a wife, it is destructive, it is toxic. A man craves the respect of the people he loves. The same token, a woman, though she wants to be respected, what she craves the most is to know that the man that she values the most loves her. We're just wired differently. You know, I saw a study a few years ago. They spent millions of dollars, and they come up with this, that the woman's brain functions differently than a man's. I'd have told him that for a few $100, wouldn't you? I mean, it doesn't take long to figure that out. I mean, in 5th grade, 4th grade, you got that figured out, that men don't think like women, right? You know it's true when it's in a country song. Brad Paisley wrote a song about this. Remember, I'm Still a Guy. And he said, when you see a lake, you see a picnic. I see a bass under a log. You know, we're different. We're different in the way we go about everything. And it's the same with this. Men want to be respected. Women want to be shown love. Are you doing the things in your marriage that you want done to you? You say, well, he doesn't love me. Have you shown him the respect that will enable him to love you the way you want to be loved? You say, well, my wife doesn't respect me. Well, have you shown her the love that will allow her to respect you? We get in these cycles. We get in these battles. And insanity is doing the same thing again and again. And hitting the same buttons, right? The same cycle. How many of you guys know where that you know there's a button, right? You're in the fight, and you know if you say it, right? This is going to go from here to like all day. How many guys know what I'm talking about? And your head is saying, don't hit the button. It's like when you walk by that bar and it says, do not open. What do you want to do? I always want to hit that bar. I mean, I'm not going to say that I've ever hit that bar and then walked away really fast. I'm too old for that. Or you know, a button that says, do not push. Well, yeah, it's the same way. So you're in this discussion. We'll call it a discussion with your wife. And you know there's the button, and you push that button, it's going to go nuclear. It's going to be for days. And we get locked in those same cycles over and over again. What I'm telling you today is, what if you tried this? What if you tried this? What if you went home and you said, okay, I'm going to step out and I'm actually going to begin to do for that person what I would want done for me? It can change your relationships. It can change your life. Point number 3. This way of life changes people. Doing this changes people. Jesus says to do this in everything. See, when I make this a lifestyle, it changes me. When I act loving to others, it makes me more lovable. You know, I figured something out. It's only been like 2 or 3 years. I have one of those faces that, you know, I've got these 2 lines right here. I didn't have them when I got married. Brother, that story you told, you know what I took out of that? Dude lost all his hair. I'm sorry, but I'm sitting there thinking, man, he's got $1 billion. He can't find a wig. There's worse things than being bald, right, brother? Oh, what was I even talking about? Oh, okay. Let's think about this story. It's a great story. Poor guy got bald. No, I have one of these faces that I look mad. Anybody else have that problem? Just me? And so I wouldn't be mad, but people would look at me and they'd think that I'm mad, or they think I'm mean. It's not that I'm mad, it's just that I'm ugly. I mean, you know, what are you going to do? And so I got this idea a few years ago that I would smile more. It's kind of like this sermon. It's pretty basic, but really, I started intentionally walking around with a smile on my face. Well, at first everybody thought, what's he up to? Sometimes they say, why are you smiling? And I mean, that is so out of character. And then my kids started thinking I was getting senile. Courtney wanted me to go get tested. What's wrong with Dad? He's walking around smiling. But I realized that when I walked around with a smile on my face, that people actually liked me more. And they would smile back. See, doing good to others is contagious. What do you do when someone smiles at you? You smile back. See, when we can take this idea. Some of you might want to take that away from the sermons, because you guys, some of you look pretty rough out there. Smile. Turn to your neighbor and smile. Turn to your neighbor and smile. Oh, I'm losing control, Courtney. Hang in there. It's all control. But this is contagious. When you do good to other people, when you're kind to other people, it actually it makes you the kind of person that can receive that kind of kindness and love back. Jesus knew it would change the world. He knew it would change the world if we would do to others. You want to be forgiven? Forgive. You want to be affirmed? Then affirm someone. You feel hurt, you feel wounded, you feel broken, could you use a gentle touch? Then have you tried being gentle to someone else? What you do is who you are. You want to be appreciated, then use tact. You enjoy a compliment, then compliment someone else. The golden rule will transform our actions, and it will transform our lives. And it may change the people around you, but it will for sure change you. I'd love to be like that, wouldn't you? Stand with me. Don't you want to be someone who can be counted on? Don't you want to be someone who can be taken for granted? Taken for granted just means that people can count on you. You know, that people, they know that you're going to show up. That you're going to show up on time. That you're going to be ready when you get there. And that you're going to contribute. That's someone you can take for granted. Don't you want to be that kind of person? Do to others what you want done to you. See, we're talking about practice. We're talking about the routine. We're talking about sameness. We're talking about repetition. Now, I realize that I'm talking about change, so it seems like it's kind of an oxymoron, but the reality is that change happens in the routine, in the repetition, in the monotonous, in the sameness. You know, we think we want something new and flashy, right? We think we want that different. But what we really want is consistency, security, sameness. We celebrate wedding anniversaries. Someone who's been married 25 years, 30 years, 50 years. We celebrate that. We don't typically celebrate the person who's been divorced the most. You ever thought about that? We celebrate the person that's hung in there. I mean, I've been sleeping with the same woman for 40 years. In love with her for 42 years. And you know the key to that? I just kept going home. I didn't sometimes know if I was going to get in. But I just kept going home. She kept opening the door. She stuck with me and I stuck with her. Same. Not the flashy, it's not the new, it's the repetition, it's the repeating, it's the process, it's the growing, it's the routine. Trust is built on the foundation of same. We got to be doing the right things when we repeat it. Repeat the right things until the routine is the reward. If you resist the monotonous, you'll miss the miraculous. So I want to challenge you with this, and we're going to partake of communion in just a moment. We're going to call us to examine ourselves in just a moment, but I want to challenge you to find one person this week, one person, one thing for someone else that you'd like done for you. Do one thing this week for someone that you would like to have done for you. Maybe it's to thank that one person at work. Maybe it's to compliment one person. Maybe it's to do a kindness to someone. To do that something for a person that we love. One thing. Like I said, it likely will change that person, but it will for sure change you. And you know what? If enough of us did it, if we could change this whole community for better. Let's bow our heads. Lord, we just pray that you will help us to open our hearts and our minds. As we examine ourselves before we partake of communion, I pray right now that you will put that person on our hearts that we need to reach out to. In that marriage, that God, you would bring healing right now to that conflict. That someone would be strong enough to step out of the routine, out of the cycle of combat and say, I'll take the initiative. I'll do I'll do. In that relationship with that child, to keep planting, to keep sowing, to keep putting in, to keeping on. Maybe it's in the family, extended family, that brother, that sister that we don't speak to, that God, this morning, this sermon will find fertile soil and take root. That God, we would be challenged to forgive, to forget, let go, set aside. Father, right now, as we open our hearts to you, as we examine ourselves, Lord, speak to us this morning. Speak to us this morning. This morning, as we